B.F. Skinner. Series of human behavior drawn from years of laboratory experiments with rats and pigeons have aroused a storm of protest from humanists, from Freudians, and from all those who cannot accept the Skinner thesis that man's behavior is controlled by his external environment and not from an inner man. In his novel, Walden Two, and later in his book, Beyond Freedom and Dignity, he described an ideal society in which the myth of individual freedom was forgotten and man was controlled for his own good. The books were alternately praised and denounced, their author adored as a messiah and abhorred as a menace. One of the most important applications of his theory of human behavior has been his own invention of the teaching machine, which he feels can revolutionize education. At Harvard, where he is virtually an institution in his own right, B.F. Skinner is the Edgar Pierce Professor of Psychology. Dr. Skinner, would you choose, if you could, to live in the kind of utopian world that you described in Walden Two and in Beyond Freedom and Dignity?
Oh, I would. I think I certainly would. Many people thought I wrote Walden Two with a tongue-in-cheek, but not at all. I'm sure I would love it there. I'm not quite sure how to produce it.
What would you have loved about it?
I would like the personal freedom to do as I please, the feeling that I was carrying my weight, doing my share of all of the tasks which are needed to make a community work, and not simply sitting back and letting someone else do the dirty work and so on. You can split the dirty work up, and it comes to a very few minutes per day for everyone, you know.
Well, perhaps it's misunderstood as a controlled society that someone is controlling things, someone is making decisions on your behalf about the environment in which you live, are they
There's
not?
no current control at all, except by the culture itself. People feel there must be a person in control, but that's a whole difficulty about trying to understand that people are not governed by other people except in very rare cases. They're governed by the world in which they live, what other people think of them in the mass. What we do during the day is not controlled by a policeman or by a priest or by a teacher or by a psychotherapist, except in rather rare cases. In general, we're controlled by what people in general do when we respond. And it's a culture as a whole that's controlling us, and that will continue to be the case. In an improved culture, we can do this in such a way that we will be much better off and be much more effective than we are now.
So that in this utopian culture that you described, the goal, so to speak, the values would be set by common agreement rather than by some person in charge or a group of people in charge, an elite?
Not in the sense of consensus or common agreement as a decision-making kind of thing. It would be set by what works out best as cultures evolve. It's an evolutionary process. Mm-hmm. We work out better ways of doing things, and we accept them when they are better because they are more effective. Better ways of producing the goods we need, better ways of getting along with each other, and so on, better ways of teaching. And we don't need to quibble about what we mean by better there. We know we can agree on that fairly readily. That is what slowly produces a workable pattern. Now, it can be done by design, and in the case of Walden Two, it was. Someone just said, this is the way we're going to try it out. But it was experimental even so. We'll try it this way, and if it doesn't work, we'll change. People keep saying to me, you didn't say in Beyond Freedom and Dignity, you didn't say who is to control. Well, there's no who. There's no man going to emerge as a ruler. It's going to be a different type of world, and that world will be what is in control.
But you said that the thing that you would enjoy about it personally would be freedom.
Oh, yes.
And yet, beyond freedom suggests in the title itself that it's beyond freedom.
If I had written a book, Beyond the Wide Missouri, would you think I was in favor of damming up the Missouri River or something like that? I'm not down on freedom or dignity. I want to redefine them. Freedom, I mean by that freedom from punitive sanctions, from kinds of control that we escape from if we can. We have escaped from many of them, but by no means all, alas. No, I'm in favor of the feeling of freedom. You feel free when you are doing what you want to do, and you do what you want to do when you are working for positive results. You have to do what you do to escape from unpleasantnesses, and that's what we get away from if we can, and that is what the struggle to freedom has been about. No, I want people to feel freer than they've ever felt before, and I want to feel free, and I want people to be more achieving than they've ever felt before, and have a greater sense of worth. And they can if they just solve the problem presented to them by the world in which they live and how to improve that so they can be more achieving, more creative, more productive.
So you have no doubt that you could have achieved what you have achieved in this kind of society, in a utopian society where you were free to do it?
Well, I don't know what leads a person to be achieving in a given case. And at the moment, I'm working on an autobiography and going back and trying to find out what happened to me as a person. And I can't find anything. I can't get the Freudian kind of thing. I can't trace any origins really in my past. I don't believe there were any very important influences on me. There were thousands of little influences. Accidentally, they all came together to produce something that I'm satisfied with. But I don't believe I could trace that, and I don't think anyone can go very far in that direction. So that to say that I would have been the person I am today if I'd grown up in Walden Two, that doesn't follow, not by any means. I think I would have done things I wanted to do, things I would be proud of having done. Yes, I can say that.
Well, so frequently in our conversation with guests, what they have achieved seems almost to have been motivated by their reaction to an unhappy childhood in some cases.
Yes, I don't see a bit of that in my own past. I see nothing but
you would eliminate
accident.
that, would you
I see
not?
accident after accident. It's amazing. I've published a little article about my research. Almost every discovery I ever made was an accident. Now, the only thing I can claim was Pasteur's famous dictum that chance favors the prepared spirit. Well, I was prepared for good results. I was very happy when they fell my way. And I latched onto them, and I made as much as I could of them.
So it's not only a matter of luck, but a matter of recognizing it when it comes along.
I didn't produce them. I was not there as a creative person. I was there as a selective creative person, but not as a producing creative person.
Well, creativity itself seems to so often, not always, but so often derive from unhappiness, adversity.
Oh, nonsense.
It is nonsense.
Well, it has done that, of course. It has done that. But it can do it. It can work in other ways. I can't imagine that Bach was a very unhappy person. He had 19 children. He could hardly have been frustrated sexually, and he put the great works. And he was just charmed by his medium, and the sheer delight of working with a medium. It doesn't come from any deep craving inside of some sort. Now, this is what the analysts have put over on us. It's a lot of nonsense, I think. Of course, Dostoevsky's not a matter. He was a God-tormented man, a man who felt guilty, terribly guilty, and he wrote out of that guilt. But then somebody else could write out of sheer happiness.
What about Mozart, who wrote his first symphony at 6? Was he a product of his environment, too?
Oh, I'm sure he was. I suppose there was a good deal of parental discipline there, and he may very well have been an unhappy person if Papa was standing by with a birch rod or something. I'm not sure of the details there, but I have the impression that he ground these things out very often because somebody had a cocktail party or a tea party and needed the new sonata, and so he dished one up for them.
But if I understand you, you do not believe that there is any innate thing in man, that is an inner man.
There's no creative man in advance. Now, the parallel with evolution is extremely interesting here. Before Darwin, it was supposed that the diversity of species on the surface of the earth was due to a creative mind, spelled with a capital M. It was an act of creation. It was the creation, was the thing, you see. The Bible talked about the creation. And that produced all the animals, of which we now know there are at least 10 million different ones on the surface of the earth. With Darwin, it turned around. The creation came afterward. The origin was random. The creation was in the selective effect on the environment, by the environment, selecting those things which worked. And Darwin moves creativity from before the fact to after the fact. He moves purpose from before to after. It moves plan from before to after, you see. And the same thing is true in what I call operant behavior. Your behavior is selected by its consequences. You don't design it in advance. Now,
can you give an example of that, operant behavior?
Well, what we're doing all the time, we're engaging in operant behavior now. Well, I'm making some noises and you're responding to them, and if I'm successful, if I get that nod from you, I'll go on the same line. If I get this, I'll change, and so on. It's what's happening after I behave. Verbal behavior is very hard to analyze, of course, in these terms, but it can be done, I think. But in everyday life, we do the things which pay off, and we tend not to do the things that don't pay off. And our behavior is shaped. Now, Darwin's book, The Origin of Species, the word origin is the main thing there, the origination of novelty. And behavior originates. We can handle the creativity perfectly well in this formulation. But it is the origination that comes from the selective action. The artist daubing paint on a canvas, and he does it possibly at random, it possibly just throws it. And if it's good, he selects it and hangs it on the wall. If it's bad, he scrapes it off and throws again. You see, it's a selection of the beautiful thing, the reinforcing thing, the rewarding thing, which is responsible for the creative work.
I'd like to ask you about positive reinforcement. Your studies have shown that if an act is rewarded, it'll be repeated, whereas if it's punished, it doesn't have the same constructive effect. No. What about your own childhood? Now that you're writing your autobiography, were you punished as a child, or were you rewarded?
Very rarely in any kind of physical way, but I was certainly very sensitive to my parents' censure, and if they were displeased, I knew it, and that was important. But the things I did during the day had nothing to do with whether my parents were approving or disapproving. I think I enjoyed them. I had all sorts of things to do, fantastic variety of things. I built things, I played games, I rambled through beautiful wooded countryside and so on. This is the kind of thing that was...
You apparently were very skillful at mechanical things as well.
Well, I just grew into that because I happened to have grown up with a work table and some tools in the back shed, that's all. You just start building things. Before long, you're building everything you need.
One accident in your life apparently led you into writing.
Yes. Well, I started writing very early, and some of the things that I've dug out now that I wrote, I published a poem when I was 10 years old, and it's going to take a great deal of courage to put that in the autobiography. It's a really awful thing. But I did write early, and I had a printing press, and I liked to print the stuff up. The very physical act of printing what I had written was important. It was very slow on the press, so I went over to my father's old discarded typewriter before long. But the production of writing, that kind of thing, was very important. Well, I wrote more and more, and when I got to college, I went on, and then I had the luck to meet Robert Frost. And we had lunch together, actually, and he asked me to send him some of my stuff. And I sent him 3 short stories at the beginning of my senior year. Well, in the spring of my senior year, I got this very favorable letter from him, which was published in the Letters of Robert Frost, although the Mr. Skinner is not identified because Lawrence Thompson got the letter from a copy in the library, I think it was at Amherst, and didn't identify the Mr. Skinner, and he couldn't find me on any of Frost's student lists. Anyway, that confirmed my belief I should become a writer, and so when I graduated, I took a year off to write, and it was a disaster.
What happened?
I had nothing to say. I knew how to write, but I had nothing to say. And fortunately, I gave up in time before I suffered too much from that, and decided I wanted to go into science, and the only science that seemed to be suitable to me with my poor preparation was psychology. So I became a psychologist.
What interested you in animal behavior? Did you grow up with animal pets as well?
Oh, we had not very many pets as such, but I used to catch turtles and snakes and chipmunks and so on. And I did see at one time a pigeon act at a state fair, a county fair. It was quite interesting, in which pigeons, there was a little facade of a building, and a pigeon looking out a window, and then fire started and smoke came out, and there was a bell ringing, and some pigeons pulled the fire engine out with some fire pigeons on it, and one of them went up a ladder and brought this other pigeon down. But I don't know whether that's one of the reasons I've specialized in pigeon behavior or not, but it probably had an influence. It showed me that something could be done with pigeons, certainly.
And curiously, you, I suppose, became famous, at least among some people, as the man who taught pigeons to play ping pong, which you did years ago, as a matter of fact.
Well, that was a demonstration experiment in a class. It was not an experiment, really. It was a demonstration. It was fun. It was very interesting.
What did it show?
Well, I was at that time the department had split off from social relations, and we were needling each other. So I set up two synthetic social relations. One was competition, and that was playing ping pong, and one was cooperation, in which two pigeons had to do a very precise act at precisely the same time. And all it showed was that with very careful programming, you could teach pigeons to do a very complicated thing. Very difficult for a pigeon to peck a ping pong ball because it looked like an egg. And pigeons wouldn't have survived very long if they were disposed to peck at eggs.
Yes.
You had to fight that particular bit of instinct.
As a matter of fact, during the war, you took up another experiment with pigeons. It was quite serious in missile guidance, didn't you?
Oh, yes. Yes, I have in my basement the only nose, I think, it's still existing of America's only missile at the time. It was called the Pelican because it had so much equipment in it to guide it that there was no room for explosives. And they used that old limerick about the beak can hold more than its belly can. You remember the Pelican?
Yes.
But we had 3 pigeons in the beak of the Pelican, and they could guide the missile. There's no question about it.
How could they guide a missile?
Well, there were lenses in the nose, and the lenses threw the target image on screen, 4-inch screens. The pigeons were in jackets behind the screens, and they were pecking at the target. If you were coming down to the ship at sea, for example, the ship would be in the middle of the field, and all 3 pigeons would be pecking at the picture of the ship. Now, if the target started to go off, that image would move to the side, and the pigeon would move to the side, and that would send a signal back to the servo mechanism and correct the flight.
Didn't you have the Humane Society on your neck?
Well, what is done to pigeons in a park is far more cruel than what would have happened in this case, because they would never have known what hit them when they blew up.
You, one of your principles, of course, is that, and you made allusion to this earlier, that man is not autonomous. He's not truly free.
Yes.
And of course, all humanists believe that man is autonomous.
Yes, oh yes, they want credit.
So that, you mean the man, they want credit for themselves for what they've achieved.
They want to feel that they are responsible for their actions. They are doing things. They deserve to be patted on the back, and that their action is due to them.
That means that what you've achieved is not due to you.
No, it's due to my history, my genetic endowment in the first place, and what has happened to that genetic endowment through the years that I've lived. I don't believe I have originated anything except as a system which has selected and adjusted and adapted and become productive in a particular way.
Ought you not to be rewarded for what you've achieved, or what,
I insist
your
upon
environment
it.
has
I
achieved?
insist.
You do.
I insist, but of course I want everybody to be rewarded. Yes, that's my line. I want everyone to be rewarded and not punished.
I want to ask you about the applications of your theories. One, of course, that is most well known to us is the teaching machine. How did that come about?
Well, the teaching machine is not an important thing in itself. There are machines which are being used, and computers are being used as teaching machines. The whole thing there is to analyze the conditions under which a pupil learns, a student learns, and to facilitate learning by improving the conditions. And a good deal of that can be done with devices of one kind or another. That's what teaching machines are.
How do you respond to your critics who say that a teaching machine simply teaches by a rote system subject, but doesn't teach the process? I
respond by asking them to look at the teaching machine. It doesn't do any such thing. There's no rote. Rote means going over and over and over again. Drill meant that too, you know. Yes. A drill is like a drill. You drill a hole by going around and around and around. No, there's no repetition in teaching machine material. Programmed instruction avoids any kind of rote.
What about the application of behaviorism to child rearing? How do you feel about the way in which children should be reared? Obviously, you don't believe they should be punished.
Well, I feel they're very badly reared now.
They are?
Certainly. I don't feel that I did a very good job, although my 2 daughters are very charming and intelligent and productive people. But I don't think anyone knows exactly how to raise children. Not enough has been done on it. But I know we do know.
It's unscientific?
Well, we do know that what's being done wrong. That's quite clear. think the first 5 or 6 years are the great wasted years in American life. We turn the child over to a busy mother who doesn't quite understand this thing, and all sorts of mistakes are made. It could be done much more effectively, and is being done more effectively. There are very good materials being prepared now and books being written that should make very effective child care possible if anyone is interested in.
Would this rule out punishment?
Oh, I would think, I would believe that it could eventually completely rule out the use of punishment. I think at the present time there are some serious conditions where you might justify a mild use of mild punishment, but even so we know better how to use punishment so that it doesn't become vicious and so on. I would prefer not to use any at all. As a matter of fact, didn't with my own children.
With your younger daughter, a good deal of attention was given to the fact that she was raised in the first few months of her life, first year of her life, I guess.
First 2.5 years,
First
yes,
2.5 years in a controlled environment, an air crib. Whatever became of the idea of an air crib?
Oh, those are still in use, and thousands of children have been raised in them. My 2 granddaughters have been raised in them.
Do they show any difference over other children?
I don't think you can tell, but nobody's made a survey of them, and well, one case or a few cases don't prove anything, but they're remarkable, I think, for making it possible to give a child very good care. Many people misunderstand it. They think you put the baby in and close it up and come back a year later, but it's only used as a crib is used, of course. And it's a marvelous environment for the baby, and it's very...
It doesn't shut the baby off from the mother's affection and all the other things that we think are so important.
Quite the contrary, because it makes it so easy to take care of a baby that the mother's love just pours out.
Why hasn't it caught on?
Well, it has, except it's very difficult to get them. People make their own. It's very hard to... American business, you know, is not enterprising, really. It will, if people have proved that refrigerators are good things, and everybody will manufacture refrigerators, but it will not take a new product. That happened to the teaching machine. You can't go out and get a market analysis to prove that people want these, so you can't convince the board of directors it's worth putting $1 million into a production line. And without a production line, you can't produce things cheaply. But it will come eventually, because it's no question, it's valuable. All sorts of rumors, of course, have spread about that daughter. Yes. She killed herself and became psychotic and so on.
And none of these things happened.
Her friends have taken courses and discovered that she'd become psychotic. So I think it bothered her for a while, but we laugh it off now.
Does the philosophy of behaviorism impinge upon the world's cosmic problems? Pollution?
Oh, of course it does.
Population control, war?
Of course it does. The main question is, why aren't we doing something more effective about it, you see?
What we're doing is not effective, obviously.
Oh, it certainly is not. Yeah. And it's not because we have not solved this problem of freedom. You see, we do need some planning. We do need some designing. And we're so scared of who is going to control that we don't allow ourselves to use common sense to take care of the future. We can look ahead to what is going to be needed and do something about it. But right away, people will rise up and say, I don't want anybody meddling in my life. I want to be able to build something where I want to build.
You can do this, I presume, by positive reinforcements of some sort, by designing an environment of positive reinforcements?
Yes, but you've got to get control of the people who have control of the environments, for example. You mentioned Walden Two. There are very few places in America where you could build the simple buildings in Walden Two now, because the zoning for multiple dwellings is so acute that you can't find land where you'd be allowed to put that kind of building up. It's been established that in America people will live in single families with half an acre at most, and so many bedrooms, and only one family related living in it. And you can't find a house in Cambridge and move 2 or 3 unrelated people into it. That's illegal.
I saw somewhere where you had suggested that we might pay school dropouts to go to school. Isn't education its own reward? Isn't that a positive reinforcement?
It is when you get the student at the point where it becomes positively reinforcing, but to begin with, you need very conspicuous reinforcers. In New York, schools are half empty now. You know, the students are all playing truant, and nobody's doing anything about it. They can't do anything about it. Well, these people are going to be they're going to grow up. They're going to have an uneducated population there of vast proportions. Now, you can save money now instead of welfare and crime prevention later by getting those people to go back to school. And you could do it perfectly well if you had spent some more money to make schools more attractive, and certainly to teach the kinds of things which they can learn. It's very much a question of doing the kinds of things that people can do. It's absurd to ask somebody to study Shakespeare in high school if he hasn't learned to read in grade school. And yet we can, and this has been proved, take the kids who have been called unteachable and teach them to read at 1.5 times the normal rate.
How do you spend your time now? You're not teaching as much.
I would like to spend my time just sitting and thinking and writing books, but I get pulled into all sorts of avenues. There are practical problems that come up, issues that arise I feel I should have something to do with and take an interest in and speak about. So I am drawn away from the ivory tower, and unfortunately I can't get all the time I want.
Is it not so that much of your time is taken up with either the extension of or the defense of the original work you have done, thereby keeping you from doing more original work?
Yes, that is it. And of course the trouble there is that's all part of my past, and hence it's not my future, and I still want to work on my future. And in going back to defend the past, I have to relive the past, but I would prefer to spend all my time on what I still have to do.
Is there no way you can close out the world, so to speak, and regain your privacy?
Well, if I were just rude and could turn people away and not answer letters and so on, I suppose it's possible, but I haven't got to that point yet.
Do you hope that more work is yet to be done?
Oh, much more. Very young, lots of very fine young people are doing it.
Thank you very much.